Hi, I'm Mary Agnes Welch, and I'm here with Peggy Nash, candidate for the Leader of the Opposition, for the Leader of the NDP. So I wanted to ask you, we're just going to have a little chat. I wanted to ask you first what your impressions are of Manitoba and Winnipeg, and what sort of the top issues you think for the NDP here would be.
Well, I've been to Winnipeg a number of times, but have not been to the far regions of the province. But my impression of Winnipeg is bustling city, growing city, majority NDP government, which I'm very happy about. A place that usually is very cold, but not today, where we've got very mild weather. And large First Nations population, strong economy in the sense of a number of manufacturing facilities, investment in public services like insurance and auto insurance, which we would love to have in other parts of the country. I know there's been issues with crime in Winnipeg. That's been a real challenge for the community. And I'm sure in the regions of Manitoba, regional development, processing raw materials is always an issue, how to have strong economic development throughout the province. So those are my impressions.
Okay. In Manitoba, we've got two of the party's three prairie members, which isn't much. And I think, I could be wrong about this, but I think you're seen as having a fairly strong Ontario base, maybe a little bit less strong in the West. So if you were leader, how would you ensure that the NDP got more seats out West?
Well, you know, we do have a number of MPs, of course, in British Columbia and in the North, but, and we have elected a number of MLAs and, of course, government here in Manitoba. But I think we need to reach out and really hear the concerns of the West. I think we need to hear the concerns of rural people and hear what their challenges are. And also, you know, there's a growing urban population in the West as well. And their needs are not necessarily the needs of urban centers in other parts of the country. So, you know, this leadership campaign, it's a wonderful opportunity for us as candidates to go out and talk about our ideas, but it's also an opportunity for us to listen to people across the country. And as leader, what I would do is make sure that I'm visiting all regions of the country, reaching out to the West and hearing their concerns. We have strong representatives like Nikki Ashton, who was a very strong voice on the Wheat Board. We have people who, like Pat Martin, an MP who's very strong from Winnipeg. But we need to reach out and listen to others in Manitoba and the prairies to hear what their concerns are and how an NDP government federally can address those concerns.
Now, you mentioned Pat Martin. He's talked about quite candidly about the idea of merging with the Liberals. And he's talked about it with local Liberals as well. Anita Neville has been on the record saying that she's open to that kind of a merger. Now, if I remember, Nathan Cullen kind of took a bit of a smashing at the debate for talking about that merger idea. Where are you on that kind of a topic? What do you think about the merger?
I'm not in favor of a merger. I believe that we have done the best ever as a federal party. We won over 100 seats on May the 2nd, and I want to build on those gains and build our movement across the country, inspire more Canadians to vote for us, but inspire more Canadians to vote. I think part of the problem is that over 40% of Canadians didn't even vote. So I would rather reach out to those who haven't voted, reach out to those who may have voted for other parties and try to inspire them with our vision.
But is that kind of building going to be possible when support in Quebec is starting to erode a little bit? There's the leadership, race that maybe doesn't have a ton of sizzle. Have you reached your peak, and is that kind of building going to be possible without a merger?
You know, let's be fair that, certainly part of our popularity, a big part of our popularity in Quebec was because of Jack Layton, Le Bon Jack. And people loved his personality, warmed to him. But, there was a lot of building that went on in Quebec. The Sherbrooke Declaration was an important step for Quebecers to see that they could be respected, their language could be protected, their history and culture could be protected, and yet they could join with progressives across the country for a federalist option. Their goal was to replace the Stephen Harper government. That's our goal across the country. And I know that once I'm leader, I can build in Quebec and build across the country and inspire those who haven't yet voted for us or don't vote to join with us and become the government in 2015.
Now, when Thomas Mulcair was here, he talked about sort of Gary Dewar as the model, kind of that Tony Blair middle style, very pragmatic, very slow-moving, very business-friendly sort of model as a really good one for the federal NDP to follow. Where are you on that sort of, maybe coming from the trade movement, movement yourself, maybe being a bit more on the left? How do you feel about that moving towards the middle idea?
Well, I'm one of the only candidates, or one of the few candidates, I guess, who actually has pragmatic experience in the private sector. I'm not the only one, I'm one of the few. Martin Singh is a business owner. But I've negotiated, yes, on the labor side, but I've negotiated with some of the largest companies across this country. And I understand the importance of bridging that gap between the needs of business and the needs of working families. So I'm someone who's been a staunch defender of social democratic principles all my life, but I understand that you have to be pragmatic and move things forward step by step. I have put jobs and the economy at the heart of my campaign, and I have very clearly said that what I want to do as leader and when we form government, what I want to do is reach out and work with business, with labor, with communities, with universities, so that we can help grow our economy, but economy that's based on environmental sustainability. I think we've got to modernize our economy, and economy that does recognize you can't keep growing inequality in our society, that we need to have strong social programs. So
do you have
that's
a
my
model?
approach.
Like, do you have sort of a model of governance style that you'd follow? Is there sort of a more left-leaning government that you sort of pattern yourself after?
Well, I look at successful economies around the world. I look at the Germans, the Koreans, the Finns, governments that have, and I know Germany has a coalition right now led by conservatives, but their approach has been to use government as a partner with business and with labor and communities. I think that's the model, as opposed to the model of the current government, which is just hands off. Let's let business decide whatever it wants to do. We'll cut their taxes and hopes and benefits trickle down into the community. And what we're seeing is that governments aren't necessarily investing. In fact, some are picking up shop and moving south of the border or overseas. So I don't think that's a model that works. We're seeing growing inequality and growing polarization. I don't think that's a good model. So my model is one where we work together.
A couple issue things, just to finish off. I wanted to ask you about your midwifery idea. That's a huge issue in Manitoba because we have no midwives, like anywhere. We have a brand new birthing center and a huge waiting list to get a midwife. So tell me a bit about that proposal to make it part of the Canada Health Act. Is that essentially how it would work?
Yeah, it's something that I know midwives are very popular in Ontario, but we just don't have enough of them. And it's something where a lot of young families, for an uncomplicated birth, they really appreciate working with a midwife, whether the birth is at home or in a hospital. They really like that personal relationship with a midwife before birth and after. And we just don't have enough midwives. There's huge waiting lists for them. And I've also met with the Aboriginal Midwives Association. I went to the First Nations, the Six Nations in Brant, Ontario. And what Aboriginal midwives will tell you is that it is so important for First Nations women to be able to give birth in their community, surrounded by friends and family, and welcome a new member of the community, and that often that doesn't happen because women are flown often many miles away from their home to give birth. So what I'd like to do is see midwifery covered as a profession under the Canada Health Act. Midwives are on salary. It's a service delivered by the provinces, but they're on salary. It's much more cost effective. And it, I believe, provides a more personal relationship because doctors, family doctors, are often so busy they don't have the same amount of time that a midwife has to spend with a family.
So would that sort of then replace sort of the patchwork of province by province funding? Because I know Alberta funds midwives, we fund midwives. So how would putting it in the Canada Health Act make it better, essentially, for...
Well, what we would do is because we've talked about providing funding for training of additional family doctors. Of course, we have so many hundreds of Canadians who do not have access to a family doctor. So what we would do is provide training for midwifery as well. For example, I just visited the Lakehead University. They have a wonderful medical school there. They train doctors, they train nurses, but I'd like to see midwifery covered under that. And the delivery of services for Medicare is still with the provinces. But if this is a profession that is covered by the Canada Health Act, it means that dollars that flow from the federal government can be provided for the training and service of midwives.
Last thing I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned crime, sort of this image of Winnipeg with a crime problem. And provincially, the NDP have been quite tough on crime. They go lobby Ottawa for changes to the Young Offenders Act, lots of different legislative changes. And that's often seen to be at odds with the federal NDP. So what would be your, given the fact that this is, a huge issue in Manitoba and there's a bit of tension between the federal and provincial parties, what would your approach be then to sort of solving the crime problem?
I completely understand that the priority for people is to make sure that they've got the protection that they need. My goal would be to prevent crime. And that means making sure we've got enough police and security on the streets. That's part of it. But I also know that with growing inequality is growing crime. And I think part of the role of the federal government is to make sure that the provinces have enough in terms of transfers that can help provide the services that people need, whether it's child care services, whether it's youth programs, educational services, access to post-secondary education. But ultimately, I know that people want to make sure that their streets are safe and that their homes are safe. So, I understand in an area where there are problems, I think we've got to be smart in terms of how we deal with crime. One of the parts of my riding has a higher incidence of crime, and people want to be able to live in peace and security. I get that. So my approach is to work to decrease inequality, to make sure we've got enough police on our streets, and to work with the provinces to try to prevent crime.
If you've ever formed government, would you roll back C-10? Would you roll back some of the sort of tough on crime measures that are working their way through Parliament now?
What I would do is my approach to crime, I want to be smart about it. I don't want to unnecessarily criminalize people. I do want to make sure that our streets are safe. So I would take a look at our crime legislation to make sure that it's effective. What we've seen in the States is some of these get tough on crime measures have unnecessarily thrown people in jail and not led to people adapting back into society once they're out of jail. In fact, has led to an increase in crime. So you see even Republicans in the States saying, it costs too much, and it's led to an increase in crime. So we want to be smart about our approach. I would certainly want to work with the provinces and work with people in the criminal justice system to make sure we're striking that right balance.
Okay. Thanks, Peggy. It's a pleasure to have you.
Well, thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Good to meet you.